Morning, Emmett.
Morning, Andrew. How are you, mate?
How are you doing? I'm
Very
all good.
thank
How
you.
are you?
Excellent, thank you. How you doing? Your video's
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, I know it's switched off because I just spied something in the background that probably won't be very conducive to the session. So yeah, the challenges of working from a home environment. I'm good. How are you? How's things?
Yeah, very good. Busy?
Excellent. Yeah, crazy busy. Yep, very good. It seems as though this last week has flown by. So I've been actually out and about a bit more this week, kind of
Okay.
having real meetings, which is nice for a change. So you kind of that Zoom fatigue kicks in a bit. So I was actually speaking to a client in the US last night who was saying that now they've mandated 25-minute maximum on Zoom meetings for mental health. So
Really?
huge US organization that we're currently one of our clients. Won't kind of say who they are, but yeah, we had to nip it at 25
Oh, wow.
minutes. So just for kind of mental health reasons. So that's starting to kick in, I guess. Yes. How's your week been?
Yeah, good. Similar, I think. So yeah, awesome. So look, I think we've got a few people dropped in already. Hi to everyone who's joined us already. I think we've got quite a cool topic today, right? I mean, it's not a typical kind of digital marketing or kind of growth marketing topic, I guess, in some respects,
No.
but so important for businesses that kind of really do have really strong growth aspirations, right?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's we kind of spoke about growth last week, obviously, and for those of you that missed it, you can catch up on kind of it's out there on our website. We also kind of host it as a podcast as well, so feel free to go back and listen to that. But essentially, yeah, it was all around growth and kind of, quite honestly, growth and customer satisfaction, stroke happiness really goes hand in hand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So look, I think, Andrew, while we've got more people joining us now, let's kind of, anything that's caught your eye this week, news-wise?
Yeah, a couple of things that kind of pops up just as kind of a point of interest. I guess the first one, which kind of blew me away a bit, was kind of another record-breaking game auction. So a super rare copy of Super Mario Brothers sold for $2 million this week, which
Wow.
which so it's a pristine sealed copy of Super Mario 64.
Okay.
Which kind of blew me away. And apparently there is a growing kind of scene where people are investing huge amounts of money in rare gaming, paraphernalia, as it were. And I just wondered, it must be the likes of us that, kind of, I didn't do it, by the way, it wasn't me that spent that on that, but it must be just nostalgia, right? The ability to kind of those memories that bring back, and then just holding that. But they're saying it's similar to art, so people are kind of now doing it. I just wonder what you thought about
that. It blows my mind, mate, if I'm honest with you, because first and foremost, like, who has that foresight, right, to either just buy it and then never open it? Like thinking, at some point it's going to make money at some point.
Who would have something like that? Who would crazy people would be buying toys and never open them?
Amazing. But I get it with toys, because that kind of stuff exists, but
yes,
kind of video games is not, right? That's not one of those things. Exactly. I mean, I get that. So I get what you do, and but there's some kind of history and track record with that. But I don't know. It's
I think it must be
fair play to
fines. It must be fines. Someone that's kind of bought an old video store. Because back in the day, obviously, I mean, going and buying games. For those of people who don't realize, it wasn't just 2 clicks on Amazon. It was, I had one in my town. We had one store that sold, Amstrad, Spectrum, Nintendo games, Sega, all up on the side, and they had that similar to Blockbuster with a fake box, and then you go to the counter and they swap it out. So this was. So I'm just wonder if it's old guys at old gaming shops and have suddenly realised, well, hold on a minute, there's a bit of money in this. But yeah, it blew me away. So so that was kind of quite interesting. What about you? Anything caught your eye?
Yeah, I think just rather than sort of caught my eye, I think in terms of actual newsworthy, it's more about that Emirates advert that's been kind of doing the rounds on social. I don't think I've ever shared an advert on social when I've shared this one twice, because I just thought it was just so smart, and I think the follow up that they did. So I think most of our audience is Dubai, but actually I've had people contact me outside of Dubai going, that can't be real, with the flight attendant, kind of standing at the top of Burj Khalifa. And then I thought it was super smart and really kind of well timed as well, where Emirates did a follow up yesterday and said, everyone keeps asking us if this is real or fake, and there you go, here's the kind of behind the scenes, and it's very real, and you're like, okay, look, this is kind of, I don't know, just really well executed. I think and I think whoever kind of was behind that have done a phenomenal job.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, stand-up job from a creative perspective and an idea, phenomenal to kind of and also look, the fact is that in the past the Burj Khalifa has been used for certain stunts, but nowhere close to the level of execution, like you said, that this has. And I think what was great was what it opened up the question, I think, was that, is it fake? Is it fake? It's got to be fake. It's got to be fake. And we're even talking about that internally. And I think you said, friends, family, friends back in the UK and family contacts. Is that real? How does that happen? And obviously the only thing that isn't real is she's not a stewardess, right? So they didn't obviously force the stewardess at gunpoint to go over Burj Khalifa as a stunt woman. But yeah, I think it's I wonder how long it's been in the making. It'll be interesting to understand, kind of when that first thought came, and obviously with the expo coming as well now, the expo's kind of being pushed out there. So timing is everything, right? So yeah, very well. Yeah, that's cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Anything else from your side?
Yeah. I'd say that this kind of really caught my eye because it's something that I look at. As far as Amazon reviews. So, when I'm kind of not sure about the product itself, or, give you an example, trying to buy a controller, right, for the Mac at the moment, it's proving quite difficult, like a game controller. So, all reading reviews and how people have done it. And basically there was a report out that there are kind of Amazon sellers are effectively begging people to delete their negative reviews. And in some instances, they're offering double refunds to ask the kind of person to kind of remove that negative review. And look, a strong story in the Wall Street Journal, in Business Insider. So it feels as though that it's out there, right? And we're not talking about big purchases yet. So what was interesting is that they contacted a few different individuals, and there was a guy that had bought a $17 like finger splint. So $17 finger splint, didn't kind of perform how he said it was going to perform. Wrote a negative review, received an offer of a $40 refund, right, to remove the negative review, because they said the impact of a negative review has such dramatic consequences on their overall sales, that it's worth them offering double, as I said, in some instances. So, when I first read this, I thought it must be, if you're buying something $100, $200, $300, but no, it's that volume game. So finger splints, I thought, was kind of a random one, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It makes total sense, right? Because I think especially on Amazon now, because you've got so many different sellers, the value of a review is significant, right? And if it puts off 5 people of making a purchase, and 5 is very kind of understated, right, when you're talking in the world of Amazon, then it makes sense. The only challenge now is, right, okay, do people start buying stuff and leaving negative reviews on purpose? Because we've seen how this kind of stuff happens, and kind of escalates in the past, right? But yeah, interesting. I think, just before we kind of kick off into the main topic, it's very linked to that. I came across a story this week where where a company in the US is suing a former employee because he's left a negative review on Glassdoor. Right.
Okay.
And Glassdoor, you know, I think we've spoken about it a few times on the show, but essentially, Glassdoor, I think, is going to become increasingly important, especially, you know, with if companies are really kind of, you know, trying to attract the best talent. These guys, you know, don't just accept jobs because the salary is decent or packaging is good. They will, you know, they will go out and really kind of research the company, try and understand the culture, try and get a feel for the management team, you know, even processes and stuff like that, right? And we're seeing a massive uptake in terms of the traffic that's going to our Glassdoor page, for example, right? Whenever we're hiring. And I think it might be something to do with the fact that obviously, you know, we hire a lot of kind of millennials and things like that. And but what's interesting is if you do again have negative reviews on Glassdoor, does that put off the best talent? And this company in the States, which is and the company's called Lone Street.
Right.
There was a former kind of software engineer who basically wasn't so great at his job as, you know, claimed by the company. But not only was he fired and then left a negative review, but what he also did is then created Google ads to drive more traffic to that Glassdoor page and his review. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not just like it's a bad review, but he's literally then decided to do some advertising behind it.
Right.
And he's now being sued for $1 million plus basically, just to you know, and again, I think it's interesting because in the past, you know, when there's been companies that have tried to take Glassdoor to court, right, and say, look, we've got, you know, negative reviews here. It's impacting, you know, our ability to hire the best people, and the courts have just ruled in favor of Glassdoor. So, you know, I think it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. But yeah, again, just the power of reviews, and I think. You know, I think we'll probably talk about this in a bit more detail during the show this morning, because I think, you know, again, the power of, you know, kind of happy employees and things like that when it comes to, you know, our main topic in terms of customer satisfaction and things like that is so kind of critical. And I think you can draw a straight line between, you know, that sort of correlation between, you know, happy employees and happy customers. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. And yeah, like I said, we'll keep a lookout and see how that kind of ends up. It'll probably be
we definitely heavily reliant in that space, right? I mean, people rely on those reviews across multiple touch points, even when it comes to, you know, I mean, when travel starts to open up again, you know, that's you look straight at those reviews. And in the past, we've kind of worked with hospitality clients where they're trying to kind of, you know, effectively ask how they can improve that review. And obviously now with clients from the employer branding perspective as well, right? How they can you know, utilize some of these tools that are out there. But it's tough. I remember here there was a huge reluctance to be involved in any kind of reviews and ratings. I mean, we have very, very strict laws in this part of the world when it comes to reviewing or rating a business or especially an individual, right? So I think there's you don't always have the kind of challenge, but you have local challenges as well. But yeah, no, I think you know, we probably a good time to kind of start digging into our deep dive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for everyone who's joined in this morning. We'll yeah, like I said, I think we've got a really kind of interesting topic today. You know, and it's quite funny because when we, you know, obviously a lot of people kind of, you know, maybe see us as a digital marketing agency or a digital agency. You know, we have a lot of kind of growth focused conversations, and it's always interesting when we kind of start to talk about, you know, things like customer satisfaction, because I think it throws a lot of clients because they're like, okay, well, why does that kind of involve us from a marketing perspective? And I think that's what we kind of want to go in today, right? In terms of the power of having really kind of you know, good feedback mechanisms.
Exactly.
You know, what you do with that feedback, why feedback's important, at what stages of maybe a customer life cycle feedback needs to be kind of incorporated. But I think we'll cover a lot of those topics. If anyone out there listening has any questions or anything related to this, shoot that through as well. So we've got a Q&A function, and we've got the chat function as well. So whatever you're more comfortable with, we'll keep an eye on both of those channels as well. But I think let's just start. Let's start from the beginning, Andrew. Like, why is this important? You know, why is it that we're talking about this today?
Yeah, look, I think it's super important, you know, because a lot of the time. So let's look at. I think if we kind of go back 14 months, a lot of the time, you know, the people come to us and talk about new client acquisition, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of focus on new client acquisition. We've got to get new clients, got to get new clients, got to get new clients. And I think that obviously, you know, we usually initiate the conversation around, well, okay, you know, tell me about your existing customer base. I want to understand them. You know, what are they involved in? What are they invested in? How happy are they, right? You know, do they refer business into you? You know, because that's something that almost feels overlooked, right? You know, you're kind of in your current customer base. So there's a lot of focus, and I think also a lot of pressure associated to new client acquisition, onboarding, and then next, and then new client acquisition, onboarding, and next. Obviously, if you're in a support environment, slightly different. But you know, for a lot of business out there, it's that going through the motions, right? So I'd say that you know, this is you know, kind of one of the core reasons why it is important to take a step back and to understand, you know, effectively, you know, how happy are your clients, right? You know, because ultimately that can lead to other things, right?
Yeah, I think yeah, you're absolutely right. I think part of this is it's interesting, right? Because when people call us in because they want to grow their business, I think that's like the summary, right? And we say to them, okay, cool, what's your retention like? They're like, we think it's pretty good, but they actually don't have any metrics around that. But it's quite funny if you say to them, okay, cool, how many leads are you generating? What's your conversion rate? You know, how long does it take to close a sales deal? They know these metrics pretty instantly, right? They can read these off. When it comes to retention, very few people have got a metric that's kind of aligned to that. Okay, we do look after our clients. We manage to work with clients on a regular basis, but we don't know what that retention figure is. And I think, you know, and it comes down to like what you said, right? It's referrals. It's basically, it's for low hanging fruit potentially. That's it, right? When you're working with somebody and you're delighting them and they're very satisfied, that could be, you know, potentially, you know, 5 more clients that's kind of sitting there, as well as the upselling opportunities that go with it, right? And you know, and when we're looking at growth as a kind of holistic way, you've got to look at obviously what you already have and how you can potentially, you know, increase whatever revenue you're generating from those clients. But you know, it just becomes sometimes something that's lost. Whereas potentially that's maybe the easiest in the first place to start. And I think part of the challenge, and especially, you know, and I think we should separate this from a B2B and B2C perspective as well. I know a lot of our clients are very kind of B2B focused, and I think a lot of our audiences actually as well. But in the B2C world, I think a lot of companies have kind of, I wouldn't say they've got it nailed, but they are collecting data. They're, you know, it's done digitally. They're collecting feedback. I mean, you know, even if it's just, you know, on an Emirates flight where at the end of the flight you get to choose one of those, what is it, 4 or 5 different options. But you know, so they're collecting some level of data. I don't know what they do with that, and I don't know genuinely. Okay, if I press a happy smiley face that the flight's been great, I don't know what happens there. I don't know if a crew get a pat on the back or anything like that, right? But I think it's you know, and I think they're missing a trick in certain aspects as well. But we, you know, again, we'll kind of talk about that as we go along. But I think in the B2B world, there's not much customer feedback, customer satisfaction surveys, and things like that kind of almost don't get used as much as they should, which I also find interesting because, again, if we're talking about consumer products, obviously it's important because you're talking about volumes of people and you've got to make sure whatever you're doing is right. In a B2B world, if you're selling products which are, I don't know, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, whatever it is, right, or services, perhaps it's probably even more important that you know your clients are happy, right? Because you've got maybe a more limited pool of customers. or a limited pool of clients, and you've got to make sure whatever you're doing is as close to perfect as possible, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the challenges, in that B2B space, and if we look at some of the multinationals or kind of enterprise layer businesses, sometimes there's a disconnect between departments, right? So the focus from a marketing perspective is kind of out there and generating new inquiries. The sales is to go and close, and then on to the next one, right? So from an operational perspective, as soon as a client becomes a client, they're kind of handed around, and in some circumstances handed off to a completely different team, right? Yeah. And therein lies some of the disconnect as well. So it's almost like whose responsibility is it to understand how happy this customer is, because ultimately that happy customer can impact the entire business. From a marketing perspective, it's far easier to gain a new client from a referral than a cold client. From a sales perspective, happy days, because obviously there's a referral source that can continue to come through. And also from an operational perspective, you should be getting recommendations from your existing clients to new clients. They should be easier clients to handle anyway, right? Because you've been recommended in. So it's kind of a bit of a win-win across the entire organization. But I guess a lot of organizations don't have anyone, who puts their hand up and says, well, okay, we should do this, or this is it. And that's essentially why we were having this session today, right?
Yeah, and again, I think what we'll do is try and keep this as tactical as possible, right? Because I think that exactly. Implementing things like this sometimes becomes more challenging, especially if you don't have the right tools and stuff. But some of this stuff isn't difficult. I think it's more about just getting those kind of processes correct. And it's quite funny. I think when people say to us, okay, cool, look, our objective is to grow our customer base by 20%. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. And we start asking questions about processes. It kind of again throws people, because I think it's one of them where if you don't have the right processes in place from an operational standpoint, I think what you touched on was really interesting, because that handoff between departments is actually when we start to kind of understand why people are perhaps dissatisfied or unsatisfied, it's basically sometimes just comes down to the fact that the sales handoff to operations just wasn't strong enough, right? The salesperson has maybe fully understood exactly what the goals and requirements were of our organization, but now it's been handed over to the operations team. That there's been a kind of disconnect, right? Or there's been some sort of friction along the way in terms of that process. And then you're right, in terms of then customer satisfaction back to perhaps marketing, if there's no kind of streamlined process that aligns those two departments, it becomes difficult. And again, back from marketing, if we almost look at that kind of, again, we talk about this flywheel and this kind of frictionless kind of process, right? If you are collecting really good customer feedback, surely that's a really strong weapon for marketing, right? Where marketing can turn around and say, right, okay, cool, look, we've got a really happy customer here. This is now a potential testimonial here. Here's a potential case study. We can make a video from this. We can do this. And that's going to basically create new sales opportunities. And again, it's that whole entire process, right? Just has to be completely frictionless and just fully aligned, right? For it to be really successful. Definitely. Yeah. So I think there's, when it comes to feedback, like we spoke about the B2C world. And again, a lot of companies get this right. You get these, NPS, Net Promoter Score surveys that are kind of sent kind of frequently, or if you've maybe, again, we'll talk about an airline reference, get off a flight, and a lot of the US airlines have really got this down to a T where, within an hour of getting off a flight, you get an NPS survey. And it says, look, how likely are you to recommend our airline or our business to friends and colleagues? And it's always a kind of 1 to 10 scale, which is the kind of industry standard on that. And that's kind of like almost like the easiest way, right? An automated email that kind of does that. But in the B2B world, Andrew, and I know, we, for example, use NPS quite frequently. We've just relaunched a new NPS program. But what other ways would you kind of recommend in terms of collecting customer feedback, or should we really kind of focus on NPS type surveys?
No, look, I think it's so if we kind of take a couple of steps back and look at, potentially the challenge of receiving that feedback. Okay. Because I think the thing is that, if it's through an employee-based environment, or the team, potentially there's a filter always attached to that, right? So it could be, for example, depending on the team who are interacting, what's going on, how happy are the clients? They're good, they're happy, like they're all good, right? So I think first of all, we kind of, have to realize that there's sometimes some challenges associated to trying to extract information about the client, right? And also there's, the comfort level of a client potentially as well, when you go to them and ask about, there's this nervousness associated to some organizations to ask a client, right? Hey, listen, can we have a call? Can we jump on a call? Can we have a session? We want to understand, we want to do a debrief, right? So all of these things, kind of play into that fact that, yes, there are other ways to judge or to to kind of look at this. I think one of the ways that we've used in the past to kind of judge how happy one of our clients is speaking to them about referrals for other prospects, right? So not necessarily references. Yeah. So kind of, I think if your client that you have is happy to give a reference to another organization, if they're legally allowed to, because obviously some organizations don't have that capability, I think that's a good indicator of kind of their happiness level, right? Also, looking to increase your overall engagement from a value perspective, you'd like to believe that customer is also happy as well. So I think there are other indicators, but the challenge with all of these is they're slightly seen through a filter, whereas an NPS environment is more based on time first and foremost. So it can be set up in a manner that it's scheduled, right? So that's another thing, that if it's left to individuals to test customer happiness, there may be a time lag, right? Or there may it's never the right time to have a conversation. So I think that just as a starting point, I think that the NPS is kind of the best approach as far as that.
Yeah, look, I think you did tell is a good point. I think the point is you've got to be brave enough to want to know.
Yeah,
I think exactly what people think of you, right? And exactly right. And I think back in the day, I think when TripAdvisor was launched, right? And we had hotels that we were working with, and they were like, TripAdvisor is terrible because basically everyone's just going to sit there moaning. And I think what's happened is, over time, I think they've realized that actually there's more positive reviews than negative reviews on these platforms, right? People are happy to share, positive feedback as well as negative.
Definitely, yeah.
But I also, we've had clients again in the hospitality industry. I'd say probably, more, a few years ago as opposed to recently. But we've sat with restaurant owners and hotel managers that are like, I only ever get to see positive reviews. Like, I know that my team are basically ripping up the ones, where someone's had a really bad experience and vented all their anger on a review, and that kind of never, that never sees the light of day again, right? That's kind of just, either thrown away. And we've had multiple kind of GMs and business owners say, look, I know this happens, but I think you're right. First and foremost, I think if it's important enough for you to really, understand what people think of you, I think if you're brave enough to do that, I think what you can do on the back of collecting this feedback becomes really powerful. And I think and I think part and parcel, and I touched on it earlier, I love the fact that Emirates want to know whether I've had a good flight or not, right? At the end of the flight, it always pops up exactly on time. It's
that's right. Yeah.
Did you enjoy the flight? Now, I've had some terrible flights with Emirates, and I've pressed the very kind of, very sad, angry, unhappy face, whatever it is, right, on the far right.
When you've been in economy, right?
Yeah.
Sad face.
That's basically it. Yeah, it's just a big sad face. But what I kind of find interesting there is, okay, cool. Look, so I've had a bad experience. Okay, I'm a Gold Emirates Skywards member. They also know where I'm sitting on a plane. Okay, so they know potentially that they can track, me, sitting in 36 be or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
They can link that back to me. Where's the escalation process, right? So the point is okay, that regular client of ours who we can track back through the flight, through the pressing of that button. And I thought, when I first saw that, I was like, this is really smart, because they're going to contact me and find out why my experience was so bad, and they didn't, right? And it's kind of one of those where, okay, look, if you are going to collect the feedback and you are brave enough to do that, what happens next, right? Yeah. And I think that's such a kind of key component to this, because I think if you are going to, it's not just, for me, it's not just about launching feedback surveys. It's the most important part of it is what you do with it after. And and it's, again, it's quite funny when we talk about people are like, okay, great, so this is for negative reviews, and we're like, no, this is for all reviews. There needs to be some sort of escalation for pretty much every type of review you get back, right? Or every kind of feedback you get back.
I think also there is, as you've mentioned, there are two distinct examples of difference of feedback, because in the States you're getting that feedback on recommendation, would you recommend, and when you land it's more of a happiness meter, right? But in both instances, as you mentioned there, if there's no follow-up, or what is the follow-up? I mean, potentially it may be that they're using that happiness meter to judge the purser, for example, right? Or the CSD, right? The cabin service director that's kind of running that flight, and if they get an overall, kind of over a period of time, and that may even go to their promotion within the organization. I guess the challenge is we don't know, right? And I think that also is important to explain to kind of customers and clients why you're asking this question, right? And look, it's obviously happier clients will ultimately lead to more business, happier employees, and the overall but also it's to make sure that the client and the customer is being serviced correctly, right? I every time you load any kind of money into any government site locally, there's a happiness meter. It's like, hey, listen, how's that? What do you mean, how's that? I just paid my electricity bill. Like, am I happy? I don't know if I'm happy about it. Like, it's great, I've got electricity and water, but so I think, again, and I've seen it used across the board there. So again, what is that being used for, right? And I think here specifically in Dubai, the happiness register was used against government services. So they launched that, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago, and they used the happiness meter that were directly interacting with customers to like a scale. It was like the wall of shame or the wall of fame, as it were, right? But again, it was also rewarding people that were having a positive experience. So it's not always that negative space, right?
Yeah, and I think it's it's, again, another good point. I think as long as you're doing something with that data, right? So is it benchmarking against other departments from like in the example of government, or are you doing it to measure individual performance or team performance? I think look, as long as something is being done with that, I think it's fine. But it has to be two ways, is my point, right? So so using it internally or for internal stakeholders is one thing, but actually, what about that person that's giving you that feedback, right? And especially like if we look at the B2B perspective or business services, I mean, ultimately, if you have, or if you offer a really poor experience to your clients, it has an impact on retention, has an impact on referrals. I mean, you mentioned references. References are obviously really key, right? Especially if you're trying to win new business, and if you don't have a source of references, obviously that has an impact, right? But I think and again, I think it might be interesting to talk about, like, for example, the new NPS policy that we've program that we've just launched, and I think it's and we've had different kind of iterations of this, and so much of this comes down to just really figuring out what is that exact precise moment that a client of yours needs to receive a survey, right? And I think it's easier when you're getting off a plane, right, or you just landed, right? I think that it's time to perfection, like I said. In that kind of business world, in the B2B world, when do you get that right? And I think that's why I think we've had so many iterations, because we've kind of looked at this and said, okay, well, if our ultimate goal, and I think and again, that's a point that we should probably discuss, right? In terms of what is your ultimate goal with, with collecting this feedback, and if it is that I want to basically collect this feedback to understand which clients are happy, which ones are unhappy, so that I can fix those problems before they potentially become a problem. And then if they're happy, what do I do with those guys? And if they're unhappy, what do I do with those guys, right? It's just having that kind of, the processes, I think, aligned to the goals. But going back to us, I think we've had so many different iterations of it, because it's difficult to get maybe the right level of feedback at the right time if you get that timing wrong, and I think that's such a sort of key component. And I think from our perspective, what we realized is that we've got maybe 2 or 3 different stages where if we get feedback at that precise moment, it can really have a powerful kind of impact for the business. And one of those is maybe sort of post onboarding, right? How has that kind of, from sales to operations, how's that handoff been? And then once operations have come into play, how good have they been, right? Let's get a kind of early sense check. And I think that's, that becomes really kind of crucial, because, I think all of the data that we've looked at is that if we have a very happily onboarded client after 45 to 60 days, then this is a client that becomes a client for the next 5 years and onwards, right? If they have a poor experience within those 45 to 60 days, that's a client that potentially doesn't renew, right? And that's, that's based on kind of real data and insights and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think, again, back to, again, what do you do about data? I think the escalation policy piece is really key, right? Because, and I think we've got that, I think, to a point where I'm quite happy with it. But I think because we use an automated system, which isn't controlled by any human, it's basically something that the management have plugged in. We can't have any of our employees go in and kind of mess with that, right? So say, for example, if they know that they're going to get a really bad review, they can't go in and say, right, stop that survey, and which I think is also important. But because it's an automated survey, and I think, Andrew, do you want to go into that? Like, if, for example, if somebody does give us I think the way we've separated it now is if someone gives us a 1 to 6 rating out of 10, we have a certain action. If someone gives us a 7 or an 8, which means they're kind of passive, kind of happy but not totally happy, there's a different action. And if it's a kind of 9 or 10, where you'd say, okay, these guys are really happy, there's another action. But do you want to talk about what we kind of do there?
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, obviously, we go back to, depending on the kind of numbers that are presented to us, we go back to the team that are dealing with that particular customer, right? So, and across the board. So, sales, as far as who brought that individual into the organization or that company into the organization, who's working on a day-to-day basis, strategy, etc. So we kind of tried to get an overview, and a snapshot of kind of current engagement and kind of previous engagement, and perhaps what was agreed at that point across the board. So either if it's negative, if it's in the middle, or positive, we need to obviously gain all of the information, right? Because obviously at that point, you may not have a daily focus on day-to-day of the account. So I think it's for pulling in that information, and then obviously depending on either if it's leans towards the positive side or negative side. At that point, it's kind of reach out to the client in some instance. Obviously, sometimes with the team, sometimes without the team, depending on the kind of particular focus. I think the thing is that bear in mind when we're dealing with this, it's number based. So at that point, there's no real context associated to the feedback, right? So that's why it's important to at least get some context. So from a positive perspective, what are we doing right? So obviously, you clearly want to recommend people. So let me understand what we're doing right and how we're. So you would recommend us. Let me understand how the job that we're doing and the good job that we're doing. And then also, hey, do you want to recommend us? So yes, you'd be happy to. And then at that point, there's an opportunity to potentially have a conversation with someone who may be willing to recommend you to somebody right now. or was that mechanism? And then obviously similarly, again, when it comes to perhaps the lower side of the scale, thankfully we actually haven't had to have too many of these conversations. But essentially, what is the misfire, right? So what's misaligned? You know, what is causing some pain and concern? You know, in that sense as well. You know, to kind of realize. And I think also we haven't said it, but it's important who gets that mail as well. You know, because that's crucial as well. If somebody's close to the project or not close to the project, you know, there may be that passive response, for example, right? You know, yeah, it's fine. Like I saw it, we've done it, and now it's a different team handling it, kind of thing. So I think that's important as well to you know, see who that particular mail is going to.
Yeah, and I think once that feedback comes in as well, I think the key part is transparency as well. So it's making sure that you know, and I think everyone who's involved in that account essentially, or that with that client, needs to see what that feedback is. I think the way that we've got it right now is any kind of review, whether it's negative or positive, comes back into the partners, so it goes up to a very kind of senior level. And actually the new one we've got now actually does collect more feedback. So if somebody does give us a low score or a high score, we're actually asking, you know, what are the actual reasons why. And I think that becomes kind of, you know, important as that kind of first base to really kind of understand where that dissatisfaction is or where the satisfaction is. But the point is, I think, you know, going back to one of your earlier points, you know, if you are interested in references and referrals and all that kind of stuff, you don't go to someone who's given you a 5 out of 10 and say, look, do you mind giving us a testimonial? Would you mind, you know, being a reference for us, right? But if you get somebody who's given you a 9 or a 10, then absolutely, that's the very next thing, right? It's not just about, okay, look, who can you refer this into, but actually, can we now build a testimony, a case study? Can we now build can we now get a testimonial? Can we get a video testimonial? Whatever these things are now, can you post reviews? Can you do that? I mean, look, we spoke about the power of all that stuff earlier. But essentially, what you want to do is maybe, you know, flog that positive review as hard as you can, because, you know, potentially that opens so many more doors for the business, right? You know, but I think that's also key. There's another kind of area as well, and again, I think in the B2B world, how this links to internal KPIs and stuff like that is really, really important. And I'll give you an idea. I mean, do you remember the conversation we've had with HubSpot regarding NPS? Do you remember those? It's a while back.
No.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, it's interesting because no, it's all right. No, because I actually thought this was really smart, and I think what they did, which was good, but it was very kind of sales focused as opposed to ops focused. But their sales team will only be eligible for promotions or pay rises if they're hitting certain NPS scores on an individual level. So if they've gone in and sold a license through to somebody else, and that customer becomes very kind of unhappy because they've maybe, you know, been sold something which was very different to what they thought it was, that's going to have an impact on potentially the career progression for that sales rep, right?
Yes.
Especially
sorry, yeah, this is some sounding familiar now. Yeah.
So they had I think I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something in the you know, like if you scored an average of say 8, then you're eligible for a pay rise. If you score an average of 9, then you're actually eligible for a promotion, right? And the people who really kind of fast tracked through the ranks are those who basically really kind of just excelled. But rather than kind of, you know, having their kind of line manager saying, do you know what, you know, John works really hard, he needs a promotion and a pay rise, they don't have anything which is, you know, very kind of either subjective or based on opinion. It's very much these are the numbers and the numbers dictate. And it's up to you to make sure your numbers are good. So if you need to over-service your clients, go and over-service your clients, right? And again, you know, incorporating customer feedback into internal KPIs, which again is quite easy to do, I think, on a B2B level, because again, you know which people are contributing towards a potential account. And it could be people who are working behind the scenes, it could be client facing, but the point is the second everyone knows that, look, there's a review coming in from or an NPS feedback coming in from a potential client, and on that account, there's 10 people working, and all 10 people here are impacted by that. Suddenly your internal team becomes a bit more cohesive, right? Because nobody wants a 4, on their record, right? Everyone wants to carry an 8 or 9. And I think if it's kind of linked to internal KPIs, I think that really kind of makes a big difference as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I think there is, it definitely removes that kind of scorched earth approach from a business development perspective. When you realize that it could potentially come back and bite you, right? And I think obviously as long as everyone knows and understands, from that. But I guess that kind of moves into. I mean, what about how potentially the customer thinks or the client thinks, right? I think that has an impact. So the fact that that you want feedback, as you mentioned there, just the fact that Emirates are asking you the question, you're happy about that, right? And I think that plays a huge part as well, because obviously, a lot of the time that it can kind of be one way, right? As far as kind of servicing clients and working with individuals and organizations and brands. So I think the fact that's obviously a big piece of it as well. The fact that you're being recognized and obviously you're asked for your opinion or voice, as it were, right?
No, 100%. And actually, that same thing doesn't have to apply just to clients, right? So again, with something that we've been working on for about 6 months now, is customer feedback, so non-sort of customer feedback, right? So prospect feedback, if anything. So what happens is obviously, we generate a lot of kind of leads for the business, and not all of those leads convert into closed business. And I think what we've been trying to understand is, okay, why? Okay, it's not like we don't necessarily want to win everything, because sometimes it's not a bad fit. But if we do go through the sales process and we get to maybe the final stages and then we don't win an account, why? Right? We need to understand that. And I think that survey's been really powerful. And that's not just an NPS survey. That's actually been a more kind of, I think there's about 5 questions that we've embedded in that. But again, I think it's really important to sometimes the fact that people know that questions are going to be asked influences and impacts behavior, right? And I think behavioral change is really one of the key kind of positive consequences of these feedback surveys, because I just know that if you're going to ask someone that I'm dealing with how I've been with them, I'm just going to be much better with them, if that makes sense, right? It's going to influence behavior. And I think we did this just because I think I was just bored and I wanted to set something up which influences behavior and just tested it. But the other side of it, it's just been really powerful, because people are now giving us feedback. And I wasn't expecting the level of feedback that we're getting, but people are giving us really strong feedback as to why they chose not to work with us. And I think that becomes quite interesting, because the second you can start to understand, well, why was it? Is it because of a salesperson? Was it the quality of a proposal? Did we not understand your requirements? All of it. If you start to kind of really get some insights into that, that's powerful. And I think on the back of it, we mentioned last week, we've got a lot of internal activities, because we did find some flaws, right? Some gaps perhaps where things weren't necessarily 10 out of 10, but they were 8 out of 10. And we're like, okay, how do we get that to a 10? Right. And again, we're using that feedback in a way which is very kind of, potentially impactful for the business. And I think, again, it doesn't have to be from people you're working with. It could be people that you tried to work with and perhaps didn't choose you.
Yeah, exactly. Look, and I think, again, that goes back to the fact that, there's at the end of the day, it's about caring, right? And I think if you, as an individual, if you feel as though the brand or business that you're interacting with cares about you, cares about your needs, cares about what you want, cares about what you can afford, or whatever those questions are, there's a nice sentiment associated to that. And then it also, kind of leans into how the organization, treats you or would potentially treat you. And I think that's kind of impactful as well. And look, I think the thing is that the thing that we should say is that this isn't the norm at the moment. right? That's kind of why we're kind of having this conversation this morning. The fact is, this is not the norm out there. It's rare that kind of we've come across this, even from a request perspective. So I can say in the last 6 months, I've had one organization that has reached out to us specifically around this, and it's something that's there. We've written about it. There's downloadable guides. We're ranking in a Google environment when people are Googling this. So, it's out there. There's just not the awareness that perhaps there should be, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, I think it's an opportunity, and I think it's an opportunity that's potentially being missed by a lot at the moment. I mean, I don't think we'll mention it, but I mean, we use HubSpot to power all of our surveys and stuff. So we have that whole environment in terms of the CRM from the first touch all the way through to kind of ongoing operational touches and stuff like that as well. So
exactly.
So again, if you're looking for a good platform, the Service Hub on HubSpot is really strong for this. It has all those escalation policies and all of those kinds of things built into it as well, which is cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, for sure. It definitely. It's obviously there are other platforms out there, but this is the one that we're using, that we're implementing. And also, I think you said there, we recently relaunched this. It went on a kind of bit of a hiatus. But obviously, it's come back, I think, stronger. And obviously now as an organization, everyone is kind of fully aware of that. And I think organizationally as well, I think we ought to touch upon this just if we kind of finish up and the level of happiness of the team as well. I think that plays a part as well on customer happiness. If they can see that your team is happy to work with them and enjoying kind of what they're doing, and I think that also plays a huge part. I mean, I think famously, obviously, we saw kind of Jeff Bezos when he went up into space thank his employees to kind of this, you've made this possible, right, for me to do this. And it was a little bit of a mini backlash, kind of like, yeah, that's great, but I can't have a pee break, so I have to pee in a bottle, kind of stuff. So I think that again kind of makes people think, well, hold on a minute, how happy is Amazon, the employees at Amazon, what's going on? Should I really be spending my hard-earned cash in a business that doesn't really care about their employees? So I think that also has a balance as well, right?
No, 100%. I think I mean, look, we've
back to your glass door at the very beginning.
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
So,
exactly right. And I think again, it's, if Glassdoor is such a good gauge now, and I think, like I said, it's increasing in popularity. I was talking to a business leader 6 weeks ago, and they've had some management changes, and he was like, the environment's pretty toxic inside of the office, and we're worried that people will kind of find out about it and stuff like that. We're trying to fix it, but it's difficult because obviously these are leaders. I said, have you checked Glassdoor? And he said no. So just literally went, got my phone out, went and had a look at it, and it was literally, I think, the last 5
everyone
reviews. Everyone knew about it. It's out there, right? And people are like, great company, used to love it. New CEOs come in, absolutely hate it now. Positives are great company to work for. Negatives, CEO, right? I mean, it's all that kind of stuff. That was kind of, and it was out there, right? And it's but there's a very clear line, like what we said before, between,
that's right,
I think, happy employees and happy clients, I think is really kind of key as well. Cool. So, heck of a week, Andrew. We've got a couple of minutes left. So, what have you found this week?
Mini hack. So we've been talking about content creation and things like that over the last couple of weeks from the hack perspective. But what we're looking at now is similarweb.com. So similarweb.com. So essentially, it allows you to look at potentially your competitive sites, see a breakdown of their visits, where they're coming from. I think our performance team has used this in the past as well, right? To kind of gain some insights into some of this. There's some kind of entry level, but this is more of an enterprise layer solution. So you're looking at kind of $200 a month plus for kind of that marketing intelligence. And then there's also some sales intelligence in there as well, so you can potentially use it to look to generate leads. But yeah, similarweb.com, worth kind of looking at just to kind of get a kind of idea on that as well.
Yeah, perfect, great stuff. Cool. Guys, thank you very much for joining us today. So if you can't catch us every week on the live webinar, we're obviously on our podcast every week as well. Podcast numbers are going through the roof, Andrew. I think it's I think we're up to 15,000 downloads now over the last, which has been great. So yeah, great stuff. I think Andrew, anything else you want to kind of finish on?
No, all good. Have a cracking week, everyone, and Amit and I look forward to seeing and kind of speaking to you guys next week.
Great, awesome. Take care, guys.
See you later. Cheers.
Bye bye.